don't start living a way bigger life than you were because you don't have to save for retirement now. Welcome to another episode of Real Personal Finance. Today, Meg, we have a listener question. Yay. Yeah, starting to get some listener questions again. Please feel free, if you want to submit a question for us to answer, go to realpersonalfinance.co and submit a question. Today's question comes from Brian. Brian, thank you for writing in. And he has something that he's struggling with a little bit. He said the one struggle that he's having around planning is he's 26 years away from retirement. And he's having trouble knowing what his expenses are going to be. And he's like, I can guess and I can plan. And he's plugged in those guesses and those plans. But he wonders at some point if it really just depends and ends up with how much he has saved in retirement will dictate how much he can spend. And it doesn't seem all that accurate to him. And is there a better way? So I know this is a common question because we get this in our practices. And of course, here we get it from Brian. Thanks for the question. So let's take a little time to spend on what we think Brian can do.
Yes. As you said, this is a question that we get frequently, and we work with clients of largely the same age. So a lot of our clients are in their 30s and 40s, and they're decades away from at least a traditional retirement age. I think it's a very human impulse to want to know that what you're doing now is sufficient for what's coming 2 or 3 decades in the future.
Yeah.
My spoiler is that you can't.
Why not?
But it's entirely human to crave that certainty.
So true. I mean, you want to make sure you're on the path to being okay, of course, right? So to your point, Meg, and also to your point, we can't really give you certainty about exactly how much you're going to need when you retire. We can get some rules of thumb that will help you gauge, are you on track? Are you ahead of being on track? Or are you behind being on track? And then we can use some examples of how we would think about it. And then we can also chat through what we'll use with clients to help even have a little bit more precision. But to Meg's point, it is a false sense of precision because we're trying to forecast something 26 years in the future. The likelihood of us knowing the actual answer is infinitesimally small.
Yep.
But in the range of potential outcomes, we can have some sense of, probability around them. So,
yeah, that actually brings up an idea that you've probably heard of before, Scott, the idea of the end of history delusion, that when we look forward 10 years in our life, we just assume things are going to be, more or less the same as they are now. Little tweaks around, a few changes around the edges. However, we look back 10 years and look at how much our lives have changed. And I know both you and I, in terms of the number of children we have, or the fact that we are business owners or not, or the state I live in, huge just upheavals in my life that I could not have seen coming until they happened.
So true.
And I think that really applies here, that one of the reasons we think we should be able to forecast this stuff is because we don't really think our lives are going to be that different. And it's a very human thing to not be able to truly grok that they will probably be wildly different in ways we just can't guess.
Yeah, it's just, it's hard to fathom the unfathomable.
Yes.
Get caught up on that.
By definition,
But to your point, and it is so true. When you look back on where you've come from, you can make big changes, but it is hard to see in the future. But also we do crave that certainty. So I think the way that we would start to help Brian get some certainty is I would just want to know, well, can you tell me what your actual expenses today are? Right.
Which is the first very big ask of anyone is
right.
Just tell me what reality is right now.
Yeah, because if you want to know you're going to be okay in retirement, well, the first thing we always have to start with is where are you today, right? And to illustrate this point, like sometimes people will be like, wow, you'll hear that like, ooh, Meg has a portfolio worth $10 million. And Meg's like, I don't have $10 million, but right now I'm going to say she does. And the
Okay.
question is Meg
Thanks.
wealthy? The question is Meg wealthy? And the answer is almost totally dependent upon how much does she spend.
Mm-hmm. It's
If
all
Meg
relative.
spends $1 million a year, she's not wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
She has 10 years of expenses in her $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
But if she spends $200,000 a year, she has 50 years of expenses.
Yeah, boy.
So she's going to have wealth for herself and probably for her kids and potentially her grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it really all starts with, what is your cash flow doing and what expenses do you have? And then once we understand those expenses, and I'm going to say, give me a baseline of what you need. Another little layer you could add if you want is, are there any expenses that will eventually go away? So for most people, that's going to be a mortgage, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fixed expense that's usually over 30 years and will eventually fall off. So for Brian, he might have one now. And when that goes away, he's saving a few $1,000s a month. So that's the first place I would look. The next place I would look is, I would just add some baseline number for medical expenses when you're retired, because right now you probably have them going through your employer, right?
For
More
health
than likely.
insurance, yep.
If you're self-employed, you're probably paying it yourself, and you probably don't need to add that, right? Because it's a giant expense.
Yes, painful.
Relatively speaking. And then the other question would be, okay, so those you're giving your base expenses. People are really good at those base expenses, but they usually forget to add in things like, I like traveling, or, oh, we buy a new car every 5 years.
Yeah,
Like,
or house repairs.
Or home repairs, right?
Or
what
remodels.
Are those extra things that need to be in your budget that you're not thinking about on a normal basis? Add all of those up, maybe keep the mortgage off to the side, and you're going to get some annual number that you need in today's dollars, right? So if you need $120,000 a year to live, and you added an extra $10,000 for you and your spouse for medical expenses, and an extra $10,000 or $20,000 for travel, I'm going to say 10 for cars and travel. Well, then we need 140 a year.
Yeah. And just to call out, you are very much just back of the napkining these guesses, right?
This is so back of the napkin.
There is
I'm
no
literally
point
making it up.
Well, that too. But there's no point in being precise. There's no value in trying to calculate, well, how much would I need to pay for medical care if I were retired?
26 years. No, because we don't know what the state of the world's going to be in 26 years. So I just want to know, what do I need now? And then what would I add to my expenses now to give me a sense of how much will I need in today's dollars when I retire, if I don't change anything, right? Another thing that you could add to that is, like, we have 2 lovely boys who are quite expensive. So,
lovely, but pricey. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the expenses that we pay for our boys, while we probably will go travel and see them when they're older, I promise that travel is not going to cost nearly as much as they do in our house right now.
Yep.
So our expenses probably go down relative to what we spend right now. But again, that's kind of how I would think of it for, what do I need? And then once you understand what you need, the next component you need to look at is, okay, so that's what I need. And now I'm just going to be really, really simple about this, because I don't want to deal with the timing of cash flows, but I'm going to assume that you are going to get Social Security. And because of you're a healthy person, you're going to opt to extend it until age 70, and you're going to retire at age 70. So at age 70, you're going to need that $140,000, but you're going to get $60,000 in Social Security. Maybe you and your spouse are going to get that. You might get more, you might get less. You can get an estimate of what that is. But that's an amount you're going to get, an income that you're not going to get from a portfolio.
Yep. And it's the world's safest income.
So it's called, I would call that a fixed income source. So if you have pensions, or maybe you have rental real estate that you've built up and it's going to be paid off, and you're going to have some level. Now, you wouldn't necessarily assume you get 12 months of cash flow there, right? That's a different episode for a different day, but you'd put some estimate for income sources there. And you'd figure out what those income sources are that you're going to be your net income for that. And then you'd break it down to, what's the amount I need? What's the net number I need after the fact? So if I'm going to need 140 and Social Security is going to be 60, I'm going to need 80 from a portfolio. Now, from a back of the napkin heuristic, really quickly, you could use something really simple like the 4% rule. It's not really a rule. We actually use more nuanced versions of this. But if we take $80,000 and divide it by 4%, the answer is $2 million. So in today's dollars right now, I need $2 million to give me $80,000 of cash flow. And I'm also I'm doing this very quickly because this is a podcast version. This is not detailed online, right? But we're not baking in taxes here yet either. So there's a little bit more nuance.
Yes, and I think it's okay that you're not baking in nuance because, again, that specificity that will be overwhelmed by
I agree.
the volatility of life over the next 26 years.
To Meg's point, when you're 26 years out, this is good enough to help you understand roughly where do you need to go. If you're, at 55 and you're going to retire at 60, we need to get really detailed. That's a different ball of wax, right? That's actually what James does now. He's really, really good at it. But so from there, I would just go, okay, so I need about 2 million, but that's in today's dollars. So I need to move that money forward, that 26 years in today's dollars. So I'm going to take 2 million as the present amount. I'm just going to give it a 3% growth rate for 26 years. And it's going to turn out to be about $4.3 million.
3% being the historical
3% being historic
average
inflation. I'm making a guess as to what is inflation going to be. Because again, I don't actually know what inflation is going to be, but I just have to make a guess. So that's my guess. And now I would be looking at it if these were Brian's numbers, I'd be looking at, okay, how much do I have invested today? That's present value. So if I have let's say I have $800,000 of investments today, and I know I want to hit that $4.3 million number in the future, and I want to hit it in 26 years. If I don't put anything invested, if I don't invest anything for the next 26 years, what's my rate of return need to be? It needs to be 6.6%, which is actually that's a nominal rate of return. That's reasonable to get in portfolios and markets. So if he already has 800K and he needs 4.3, he may not even need to save for retirement. So is he going to be okay? Yes. This is the way I would think of it, like back of the napkin.
And that framework you just used is something we used frequently with clients to give them a sense of whether they've hit what we've called, I think we've discussed this before, coast fire. That idea of you don't need to save anymore. You just need to be able to pay your bills with your earnings. And
I was thinking about that the other day after that chat, and that got me thinking, I'm like, I love that. And it made me wonder. I was like, but wait. I was like, don't start living a way bigger life than you were, because you don't have to save for retirement now, right? Because then you're going to go come back to me when it's time to retire and go, okay, I'm ready to live that life we've been living for the last 15 years. And I'm like, well, we planned for you to live the life you lived 16 years ago.
Expenses are, as far as I can tell, expenses are the linchpin in successful retirement planning. So if you change the expenses, everything else changes.
Yes, 100%. It all comes back to how much do you spend, which is why I started with, is a person with $10 million, are they wealthy? And it's always, how much do they spend?
Yeah.
How much do they spend? Yeah. That's the math. But, obviously you and I both know that, like, when you want to plan for something that far in the future, the chances of something changing along the way,
something
are just
major changing along the way.
Massive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we were discussing this before the recording, that we've each seen this over and over. I mean, not only in our own lives, but in our clients' lives. And sometimes it's things that our clients or we choose. We don't have to choose it. We don't have to choose a thing that changes our financial life, but we do. We choose to start a business, or we choose to change careers, or take a multi-year sabbatical, or stay home with kids, or any of those things. Or you can sort of choose in the future, once you're retired, to move states, right? Like, I'm living in Washington State now. Who knows in the future? I might choose, my kids end up in California. I might choose to move to California. All of those things change expenses and or income, and therefore affect this entire calculation. And I think those are all things you can control, more or less. So that's sort of comforting to know you can control them. And then there are the changes in your life, to use your words, that are thrust upon you.
Yeah.
And we've seen that when it comes to kids, having to, I desperately want kids. It turns out I need some fertility help. In fact, clients spend $200,000 with surrogacy. And this is what they need to do to have kids, which is a sort of a non-negotiable for them, right? Or they have older parents who all of a sudden need their caregiving, and their
Mm-hmm.
parents haven't planned well enough for their circumstances. And so now you really are obligated, certainly sort of morally and sometimes even financially, to
Mm-hmm.
support your parents in a really meaningful financial way. And so now all of a sudden, your predictions of what your expenses would be, totally wrong.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
Right.
we've seen that with caregiving with parents on more than one occasion. And I
Yeah.
think more to come with this Gen X generation of
Mhm.
who are really, and the older millennials are becoming the true sandwich generation where you're raising your kids and your parents are needing help as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why when I think of goals that are as far off as 26 years, I think the math or the analysis you did, very helpful. And you have, because you have to know, like, am I talking about $1 million or $100 million? Right? That kind of analysis can usually get you in that sort of ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it can't get that accurate. And so you need to revisit that calculation regularly to sort of course correct along the way, because it's not until a goal gets really close to you that you can actually tell yourself with any sort of reliability, oh, I need to have this much money to do it. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
the 100%. Like to your point, like inflation spiked recently. It was very high in the 70s and 80s. Um, and so really what that meant was it was eroding the value of your
Mhm.
investments very, very quickly. And we don't know what's really going to happen, right? So to your point, the best thing that we can do at any given time is set a course, make a choice, put a plan to work, and then come back and revisit the plan.
Yep.
And then and that's the joy of financial planning in our profession. Is our job is to get clients, and I actually sometimes think I forget to do this with clients to remind them. And we call it
Mhm.
an annual renewal meeting when we meet with
Mhm.
clients. But the whole point is to come back and look at here's the goals,
Mhm.
here's where you are in your life, here are the things that are most important to you, here are the choices that we made, what's gone well and what hasn't gone well,
Right.
right?
What's
And
happened
most
that we what's happened as we predicted it would versus
Right.
happened that we didn't
Oh, the
predict.
markets came back better than we thought they were last year. Excellent. So that means we're a little bit ahead. Great. Or, oh, you know what? There was a big drawdown in the markets.
Mhm.
Tough.
Yeah. This reminds me, perhaps listeners won't care that much about this sort of language pedantry, but certainly in our profession, a lot of people talk about the difference between a plan and planning.
Yes.
And what we're talking about is planning. And,
Yes.
maybe the points along the way are individual plans, but each individual plan, you know, immediately starts going stale the moment you walk out of the, metaphorical office.
Yes.
And so all this stuff really does require, not you don't have to obsess about it all the time, but once a year, just
Hmm.
go look at, are you still headed in the right direction? Is your destination still the destination you want? Are all the inputs still sort of the best information we have now?
Exactly. That's it. And then it truly is planning is the ability to come back and assess what's happened and ask ourselves, what's the next best thing we can do to get us to the goal as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
Right? And as quickly as possible has a bit of it's like a little asterisk next to it because there's a thing about like, well, how much risk do you need to take? Are you willing to take? And are you able to take? Right?
Mhm.
Like people sometimes can go, you can go try to be a gambler or a speculator to be
To
to
juice
win
it.
overnight,
Yeah.
and that can really work against you. So it's really about helping set a prudent path for you to do the best you can.
Yeah, I was at a conference about a month ago, and one of the planners there was talking about, and I think you've actually used this term also, Scott, this idea of just building resilience, right?
Hmm.
Resilience is the only tool or resource we can actively and explicitly work to build right now that is going to be useful no matter what happens
100%.
in the future. And that can be resilience financially, the size of our portfolio, the size of our emergency cash cushion, all that sort of stuff. It can be resilience in terms of, physical and mental health, our relationships, our career expertise, all of that.
What I think we should end with is resiliency, because when it comes back to Brian's question of, I want to nail this, I want to know exactly what I should do. My answer back to him, if we were having if we were able to sit down and have a real chat, would just be, well, walk me through your numbers and, what's your savings rate today? And are you and if he has a spouse or a partner in life, are the two of you truly happy with everything you're doing in life? As you start to have more income, are there places you want to put it? Or would you rather, are you just totally content with life now? And if you're totally content with life now and the lifestyle that you're living, to me, the resiliency that you can build is don't live into the paycheck as the rises come or the extra RSUs or the extra bonuses, and instead build that resiliency in your own balance sheet. And all you're going to do is create financial freedom for yourself far faster than you realize you're able to because of compounding. And it will make it so that if you want to retire sooner or change careers or do something else, you have the flexibility now.
Yeah, that is a great place to end. I agree.
All right. Well, thanks again for the question. If you guys want to submit a question, feel free to go to realpersonalfinance.co and hit submit a question. If you're enjoying these chats, please feel free to leave us a review wherever you listen. Hope you have a great week.